Then the Spirit lifted me up and brought me to the gate of the house of the Lord that faces east. There, at the entrance of the gate, were 25 men. And I saw among them Jazaniah son of Azur, and Pelatiah son of Benaiah, leaders of the people. The Lord said to me. So he knew who these guys were. I don't know who these guys are. I mean, I never met them, and we don't have any other information about them. But Ezekiel had lived in Jerusalem for 25 years, until he was captured 6 years earlier. So he would have known who these people were. Jazaniah and Benaiah were still in the city, even after Ezekiel was taken out of it. So he would have recognized them. They were leaders of the people, in some way or another. I don't know if they were civic leaders or religious leaders or what they were exactly. I'm guessing they were religious leaders. I'm guessing that they are supposed to be priests who are in the temple area, but I don't really know for sure. Anyway, the Lord said to me, Son of man, these are the men who are plotting evil and are giving wicked advice in this city. Now Jeremiah, when he sent letters to the exiles in Babylon, he warned them about the false prophets. He said not to listen to them, the people who are telling you that you'll be back soon, that your captivity will only last a short time, and you'll be back soon before you know it. He said that don't listen to them, and he spoke in general terms about just not listening to this message in general, but then he gave a couple of specific examples. Jeremiah did name a couple of specific false prophets who were spreading this message. Jeremiah 29, in part of this letter, in verse 21, he names them as Ahab son of Kaliah and Zedekiah son of Messiah. And those are the guys who were in Babylon with Ezekiel. Ezekiel never mentions them. And they were the guys who were in Babylon with Ezekiel who were telling the people there that they were going to be returning home soon. And that was a false message. So he didn't just speak in generalities. He didn't just speak about not listening to false messengers in general. He gave a couple of specific examples of two men in particular. He named them and their fathers about these are the guys who are giving you the wrong advice. He does that here in Ezekiel too, about Jerusalem. So Ezekiel doesn't mention the guys that Jeremiah mentioned in Babylon, and Jeremiah didn't mention these guys in Jerusalem. Ezekiel mentions. Ezekiel also is going to highlight a couple of guys who are in Jerusalem who are also being the problem. There probably were more than just these two. Okay. I think we can safely assume that there were more people in on it than just these two guys. But these two guys were clearly near the top of the food chain in terms of being the bad influences. It helps to get specific. Okay, it's one thing to speak in generalities and speak of overall conditions and things like that. And that's good. That's good sometimes. There's nothing wrong with that. That can be good at times. Sometimes specific advice or specific recommendations don't apply to some situations. Okay? Sometimes you need to speak more generally because the circumstances and the lessons to be learned are more general in nature. Sometimes, though, it can help to get specific. In fact, there comes a point when usually you do need to get specific. There comes a point when you need to leave the generalities behind and get specific so that you can take the general advice and apply it specifically to your current situation. The Lord said to me, Son of man, these are the men who are plotting evil and giving wicked advice in this city. They say, will it not soon be time to build houses? Now there is a footnote here. Another way of saying this is not the time to build houses. This city is a cooking pot, and we are the meat. Therefore, now that's what they said. That's what those men in Jerusalem are saying. Now God says this to Ezekiel. Therefore, Ezekiel, prophesy against them. Prophesy, son of man. So basically what they're saying is that they're going to be okay. All right. I don't know exactly what the grammar in Hebrew is. This verse is troublesome. If you look at this version, it has a couple of footnotes down there giving a couple of different renderings for this. And other translations have the same. If you look at the commentaries, like this verse is kind of troublesome. So I don't know exactly what the Hebrew grammar boils down to, or exactly what's being spoken here. But the message being communicated is that these guys are trying to tell the people in Jerusalem that things are fine. That the further judgment is not going to come. The people who were taken already, like Ezekiel, they're the bad guys. Forget about them. We're the chosen people, all those of us still here in Jerusalem, and we're going to be okay. That's essentially what they're saying. I don't know the mechanics of the Hebrew grammar of these exact lines, but essentially that's what they're saying. That's the message behind what they're saying. Then the Spirit of the Lord came upon me, and he told me to say, this is what the Lord says. This is what you are saying, O house of Israel, but I know what is going through your mind. You have killed many people in this city, and filled its streets with the dead. That could be a reference to Manasseh filling this city as in blood. We read about that in Jeremiah and in the history books. I'm not entirely sure. Therefore, this is what the sovereign... It could also be a reference to the child sacrifices. Jeremiah condemned those too, so it could be referring to that as well. I don't know. Therefore, this is what the sovereign Lord says. The bodies you have thrown there are the meat, and this city is the pot. But I will drive you out of it. So whatever imagery these people are talking about with their pots and meat, they were trying to communicate the message that they were going to be safe. They're going to be safe inside this pot somehow. I don't know. I don't know exactly what this imagery was supposed to convey to the people. But the idea behind it was that they were going to be safe. And God is saying, no, I'm going to drive you out of it. You fear the sword, and the sword is what I will bring against you, declares the sovereign Lord. I will drive you out of the city, and hand you over to foreigners, and inflict punishment on you. You will fall by the sword, and I will execute judgment on you at the borders of Israel. Then you will know that I am the Lord. This city will not be a pot for you, nor will you be the meat in it. I will execute judgment on you at the borders of Israel. And you will know that I am the Lord, for you have not followed my decrees, or kept my laws, but have conformed to the standards of the nations around you. As we read earlier, they are actually doing worse than those nations were. Now, as I was prophesying, this is Ezekiel speaking here again, Pelatiah, son of Benaiah, died. Then I fell face down. I don't know if that means he literally dropped dead at that moment in time over in Jerusalem or what. And Ezekiel saw that in the vision. I don't know. But Ezekiel saw that happen, at least in his vision. Then I fell face down and cried out in a loud voice, "Ah, sovereign Lord, will you completely destroy the remnant of Israel?" The word of the Lord came to me. Son of man, Ezekiel is not happy about this. Jeremiah was a lot more vocal in expressing his complaints to God. Ezekiel has been a lot more subdued. He hasn't been arguing or wrestling with it nearly to the degree that Jeremiah was doing, but he's not happy about it either. And he knew these men. Like I said, these men would have been known to him before he was taken into captivity. He may have even liked them. He may have even thought they were good guys. I don't know, but clearly he is distressed at seeing, at least in his vision, one of these men die. The word of the Lord came to me, Son of man, human, your brothers who are your blood relatives, and the whole house of Israel, are those of whom, and this is referring here to the exiles, there's a footnote down saying, they're your brothers who are in exile with you. So, these people, these are the ones of those whom, okay, let me try it again. They are those of whom the people of Jerusalem have said, they are far away from the Lord. This land was given to us as our possession. So the people of Jerusalem were saying, those people have already been taken captive, they're gone. They're the bad guys. Don't have to worry about them. They were taken captive because they're the bad guys, but we're the good guys. We're going to be safe and secure here in the city. Don't worry, everything is fine. That's basically the message that was being spoken. But again, the people in Babylon may have thought that too. Part of Ezekiel's message is to convince the people in Babylon that God has not given up on them just because they went into captivity first. And as we saw in Jeremiah with his vast vision of the basket of the fig trees, the vision of the basket of pigs, that God considered the people he sent away first to be the cream of the crop. These are the better people. The ones who were in Babylon, though they were idolaters, they were still the better ones. They are the ones whose hearts were ultimately going to be more receptive to what God had to say. It wouldn't happen right away, but it would happen eventually. So from God's point of view, the people who were sent out first were actually the better ones. But that's not how either the captives themselves saw it or the survivors in Jerusalem at the time. Therefore say, this is what the sovereign Lord says. Although I sent them far away from the nations, among the nations, and scattered them among the countries, yet for a little while I have been a sanctuary for them in the countries where they have gone. That's the meaning of God's taking his chariot to Babylon. He is reassuring Ezekiel and the other captives that he's not limited to just being the God of Jerusalem. He can go to Babylon to be with them there too. Therefore say, this is what the sovereign Lord says. I will gather you from the nations and bring you back from the countries where you've been scattered, and I will give you back the land of Israel again. They will return to it and remove all of its vile images and detestable idols. I will give them an undivided heart and put a new spirit in them. This is Ezekiel's reference to the new covenant. We read about that more clearly and specifically and elaborately in Jeremiah 31. And Ezekiel's referring to it here by saying that they're going to get a new spirit. I'll remove from them their heart of stone and give them a heart of flesh. Then they will follow my decrees and be careful to keep my laws. They will be my people, and I will be their God. But as for those whose hearts are devoted to their vile images and their detestable idols, I will bring down on their own heads what they have done, declares the sovereign Lord. The death penalty was called for in the case of idolaters. Obviously, for centuries, they have not been carrying out the death penalty on idolaters, but they were supposed to. So they're finally going to get what they've had coming to them for 800 years or whatever. Then the cherubim with the wheels beside them spread their wings, and the glory of the God of Israel was above them. The glory of the Lord went up from within the city and stopped above the mountain east of it. So he's leaving the city. He is leaving Jerusalem. The Spirit lifted me up and brought me back to the exiles in Babylonia in the vision given by the Spirit of God. Then the vision I had seen went up from me, so the chariot of God is leaving again, and I told the exiles everything the Lord had shown me. I want to, okay, that's probably going to be enough for today, because we're not going to get to the next set of dates for quite a while now, so at the end of this video isn't particularly long, so I'm going to spend a couple minutes here at the end talking about something, and I'll be mentioning this again as we go, certainly. I will definitely not, I'll definitely be talking about this more. This is not the last you'll hear me speak of this, but these prophets, I've said before too, this is not the first time you've heard me talk about this, won't be the last time you heard me talk about this. These prophets spoke in visions and in figurative language. Ezekiel doesn't have a lot of poetry in it, but it does have a lot of visions. Ezekiel is speaking of a vision. He's communicating a vision he saw. He's also trying to write down in words a description of the things he did to visibly perform signs to the people in front of him. So it's all very visionary. I mentioned before about how the prophets are painting a picture for us. Isaiah was painting a picture for us. Jeremiah was painting a picture for us. Ezekiel's painting a picture for us. And this picture that they're painting speaks of this glorious future for Israel. All of the prophets ultimately paint this same kind of picture. But they didn't necessarily know what they were talking about. It wasn't going to happen in their day. Okay, Ezekiel himself was not going to go back to Jerusalem from Babylon. I don't know when Ezekiel died, but I'm confident he did not live long enough to be in any kind of fit state to go back to Jerusalem after the fall. He would have been 100 years old, or close to it, by the time they were allowed to go back. And even if he was still alive, I doubt he made that journey. Daniel, when we read Daniel, he was actually taken into Babylonian captivity even before Ezekiel was. And he may have been a younger man than Ezekiel, probably on the same age, actually. I don't get Daniel was still in Babylon even after it fell and fell to the Persians, and he wasn't officially in the Persian Empire that replaced Babylon's. And I don't think he ever went back to Jerusalem. Some of them did, okay, but the Isaiah wasn't even in captivity. He died before that captivity even started. Okay, so the prophets are painting this picture of this glorious future glory for Israel. But the actual fulfillment of this picture, the things that they're talking about, it didn't occur all at once. Some of it hasn't even happened now to this day. There are different parts of fulfillment to these prophecies that the prophets aren't necessarily picking up on. Jesus will say in the New Testament, the men of old, the prophets of old, longed to see the things the apostle was seeing, but didn't get to see them. They didn't know what they were talking about. Paul will say that. Peter will say that, I believe. That the prophets were speaking as they were moved by the Holy Spirit, but they didn't know the things they were talking about. It was for times after them. They wrote these messages down for generations to come after them. Jeremiah spoke his message to the people. Now, he wrote it down at different points in time along the way. But the book that we have of Jeremiah was compiled and written by him after his ministry. Maybe even not by him, maybe by Baruch or somebody else who had access to them. So, they were written for generations to come after. The message was spoken to the people of their day, and it was written for the people who would come after them. That's true for all the prophets. It's true for Ezekiel as well. They didn't necessarily know what they were talking about. All they saw were these visions of this glorious future. But these visions, as it actually occurred in history, these visions were fulfilled in different parts at different times. Or I should say, different parts of these visions were fulfilled at different times. And many of them have already happened in the course of history. They did return from exile. Okay, so part of these visions is about this return from exile. Well, that did happen. They did have a Messiah come. There was a king that was going to come and rule them. He came. This king did establish a kingdom. It was not the sort of kingdom that the Israelites were looking for, because they had in mind this glorious physical national kingdom, which was not actually the sort of kingdom that the Messiah was going to establish. But he did establish a kingdom, and he is going to eventually someday return and consummate this kingdom. And that still hasn't happened. So these visions that these prophets paint for us, these pictures they paint for us, take like all of this into consideration, but they don't separate them in these different separate fulfillments that occurred over the course of time. And just keep that in mind as you read Ezekiel, especially the end of Ezekiel, because Ezekiel is going to culminate with this big vision of this restored Jerusalem. Well, it's not really named Jerusalem, but this restored city that we're supposed to probably assume is Jerusalem, and the temple in it. But he's not talking about, as it turns out, he may have thought, Ezekiel himself may have legitimately thought that he was talking about an actual temple that was going to be built in the city when the Jews went back there 50 years after he died or whatever. He may have thought that. Ezekiel himself may have legitimately thought that. As it turns out, that's not what the Spirit meant. When the Spirit spoke these words to Ezekiel and gave this vision to Ezekiel, he didn't intend for it to be seen as though this was literally a blueprint for the sort of temple they're supposed to build once they get back into the land a few decades later. Because that's not what happened. Nor should we take this to be a statement of what the sort of temple we're going to build in the future when the kingdom is consummated and every enemy has been defeated and there is no more curse. There will not be a temple in that kingdom. The end of Revelation makes that clear. So we shouldn't look at it as everything being literal, but everything is part of this message of this glorious future restoration and exaltation of Israel, which is the sort of thing that these people wanted to hear. Okay, so this message that's being spoken here, are being spoken to people who live in the early 500s BC, who were prisoners, who were taken captive to Babylon, and they're not slaves per se like they were in Egypt, but they're being held in Babylon against their will, and they want to go back, but they're not certain why God's doing this to them, and they've got to be taught all these lessons. So God is speaking these things to them in language that makes sense to them, and speaking these things about the future in ways that make sense to them. And we have to keep that in mind. We have to put ourselves in their mindset and hear it the way they heard it. Now again, Ezekiel didn't know everything he was talking about, which the New Testament makes clear. So we have to take that into consideration too. We have an advantage. They have an advantage that we don't have, and that they were living there at the time. So the immediacy of the circumstances means that this made more sense to them. They didn't have to have this explained to them the way that we do, because they knew it, because they lived in that culture at that time. It was their own experience. But we had the advantage over them in that we had the complete revelation, which they didn't have. Ezekiel has more than Moses did, but Ezekiel doesn't have the complete revelation. He has more than Isaiah did, because Isaiah was 100 years before Ezekiel as well. So Ezekiel has more revelation on hand than previous prophets had done in his day. But we still have more than he does. And so we have that advantage, which is a great advantage. So we can look beyond the prophets, and even the prophets themselves spoke, to see their ultimate fulfillment and meaning. And we're going to see a lot of the content of Ezekiel mimicked and duplicated and kind of referred to in Revelation, which gives us an updated account of this vision. So we can be confident that the vision in Ezekiel, at the end of Ezekiel at least, doesn't have to happen literally, because Revelation helps recontextualize that for the future, for our own future. By the time Revelation is written, the exile, the return from exile has already happened. The Messiah has come. The kingdom has been established. All we're waiting now for is the consummation of the kingdom, which the end of Revelation still says is yet to come. And the end of Revelation pulls back to the end of Ezekiel, and also pulls back to the end of Isaiah. We read about that when we read Isaiah. So we know that some of this stuff is still in the future. A lot of it's already happened. The return from exile has already happened. The Messiah, the coming of the King has already happened. The coming of the kingdom has already happened. That's not yet to come either. A lot of people today say the kingdom is yet to come. That's not true. The kingdom is here. The kingdom came in Jesus' day. He established it when he left. So that's not a future event either any longer. The kingdom is here. But there will be a consummation of the kingdom, where all dominion in the heaven and earth is brought under the reign of the King. And all rebellion and sin is wiped away forever, and the curse on creation is finally undone. That hasn't happened yet, and that is still in the future. And we know from comparing the endings of Isaiah and Ezekiel to Revelation that some of the prophecies of these ancient Old Testament prophets still haven't happened, because they link up with what Revelation says is still in our future. So these prophets are painting this great picture of what life is going to be like, but they're doing it to people who are captives in a foreign land of cruel, idolatrous possessors, and they need to be reassured in the strongest possible terms that they have something to look forward to in the future.